April 29th, 1999. This is being recorded at 1401 Marlin Drive. I am speaking with Gerald Green. Please state your name.
Gerald Green.
Do I have your permission to interview you?
Yes.
Do I have your permission to submit this interview to Marion High School?
Yes.
Do I have your permission to submit this interview to the Marion Public Library?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. You could start off telling me a little bit about your life as a child in Marion, where you lived, and how you grew up.
Well, I came to Marion when I was about 5 years old. My first home in Marion is now a convenience station at the corner of 2nd and the Bypass. That was the first place we lived in Marion. At that time, what is now the highway was a gravel road. There was not much out there. Great place for little kids. You could run around and not worry about getting hurt.
What did you do for fun when you grew up? What was there in Marion to do for a child?
There wasn't a whole lot to do. Just run around like kids do. Well, it was quite a few years before the skating rink came in, and that was a very popular place for a while, but really it was just entertaining yourself like kids do.
Well, who were some of the people that you would associate with when you were a kid?
Oh, that's going to be tough. That's going way back. In the early days, I really can't remember. I can see some of those kids, but I couldn't give you a name. It's virtually impossible. As we grew up later on, it's still a little difficult to pick out people. Mostly there were kids I knew in school. By the time I was ready to go to school, we were living around 22nd and Adams Street. We went to school at, so I can't tell you whether they tore it down. But mostly it was games kids play, a little softball, baseball, usually in very small areas, because there weren't any large areas out in Marionstown at that time.
Well, could you tell me a little bit about your life at school, even elementary school, high school, and all the way through? What you liked, what subjects you liked, and about the school itself, even.
Elementary school was not that pleasant an experience. All the teachers were older women, and I mean probably close to my age. They were not interesting. We had one principal, a male principal, who would get out on the lot and play with the kids. But the female teachers didn't want too much to do with us. Really. It was a tough enough job, I guess, in the classroom. Beyond that, they didn't want to do it. After grade school, I went to McCullough, and the main thing I remember about that was the walk to get there and back, and it didn't make any difference what kind of weather it was, you had to walk it. Later on, after I left McCullough, the city's transit system, we had electric streetcars, offered passes for school kids, and that made going to Marion High School much, much easier. I can only remember a couple of teachers in junior high school, and I remember I didn't like them very much. I still remember one who had a school play at one time that cost 10 cents to get in. It was during the Depression. And I wasn't going to ask my mother for a dime to go to that play. So So because I didn't go, I was the only student in the room that didn't go to the play. The teacher had to stay in the room with me, and she let me know that she really didn't care for that. That's the one thing I remember about her. I've seen her later in life. She's dead now, but that was always the first thing that came to my mind. That, she objected to the fact that I wouldn't ask my mother for a dime to go to a student play. Later on, when I got into high school, it was a much better experience. I can remember the Ballinger sisters, Julie and Jessie. Julie taught English, and Jessie taught math. They were two of the most impressive teachers I ever knew. They were homemades. They lived within walking distance of the high school, and they were the best teachers that I have ever known. They knew how to get a subject across, and they made every effort. If they thought you were lagging just a little bit, make an effort to talk to you at noon hour, even though we weren't supposed to be in the high school at noon hour. They would break the rules themselves and say, "Come in and we'll work on this." Then there was Carolyn Wilhite. She was an English literature teacher. And when I found out I had to take English literature, I had no desire for that, but I didn't have a way to get out. But she made that so interesting that kids were anxious to go to her classes. And we could have fun with her. Reading Macbeth. She would read it and she would act it out. She would act the various parts out, and then you have to read it yourself. And she'd make you get up and go through these acting motions that she did. And it got to the point where everybody really liked that class. She later was dumped from the system. I don't know why. She went to Ball State to teach over there from high school. So somebody realized that she was an excellent teacher. There was a little bit of cliques in that school. But if you just learned to ignore them, it didn't bother me too much. That school was up on the hill, you know, where that retirement home is now. A rather overcrowded school, I'll tell you that. But high school experiences were good, except for the fact that that was during the war, and I didn't go to my graduation because I only had a matter. I turned 18 while I was still in school, and I already had my notice of when I was going to have to show up for the Army, and that kind of killed everything. I didn't feel like I wanted to participate in that because it didn't seem to really mean too much. I did get my diploma. They mailed that to me. But Warren High School is a pretty decent place. Most of the troublemakers that you run into, and particularly in junior high, never went on to high school. You never saw them again after junior high. And that made it a lot better. Things were quieter. I guess nobody minded because the school was too crowded anyhow.
Well, you mentioned a little bit about the Depression. What do you remember from sacrifices you had to make during the Depression?
Well, you know, in my mind, I don't remember any sacrifices. My dad had a business, a welding shop. I remember going down there. My mother kept books in his office, going down on Saturday evenings. They worked 6 days a week. And watch him pay people off that he'd come into work with a bag full of live chickens, crate of eggs. My mother used to get sides of pork, quarter of a beef. She would have to take that home and cut it up and can it before going back to work again on Monday. And for my parents, I think it was pretty tough for a kid. You never went without a meal. Well, I say nobody did. I don't know that nobody did, but we never did. And there was always a neighbor, somebody that would help you with anything they could help you with. I know we were just young kids, and my mother was working. The neighbors took everybody under their wing, all the kids in the neighborhood, and they disciplined you. If you were out there doing something you're not supposed to be doing, they'd get right to it. And then, of course, your parents would find out about it when they got home. But as I remember it, it was a pretty nice time. It wasn't all that bad, except, like I say, my parents had all this worry. My father stayed in business until 1938, and then he went bankrupt in a depression in the middle of, a recession in the middle of a depression in 1938. But he immediately started another business, and that's the one we're running today. I don't know if I could have done the things he did or not. He had some kind of strength that I don't think I could account for.
Well, what do you remember about working for your father?
Well, I worked, my older brother and I started working while we were still in junior high school. We were running lathes and milling machines, drill presses, strictly against the law, but it was wartime and you couldn't hire people. Everybody was employed. So in order to get his machines done, he'd go out and sell a machine, come back and we'd build it. He'd take it out and deliver it, and we would work while he was gone. I would never let my own kids do that, but with him it was a matter of necessity. If he was going to get anything done, the only help he had was going to have to do it. After I came out of the Army and went to work for him, things were pretty tough at that time because they allocated material during the war and they kept up those allocations after, like steel and cast iron and so forth and so on. So he could only work part of the year, and then he had some ground, he farmed the ground, and then fall came and he went back in the plant. By that time he had accumulated enough steel and gray iron that he could start building machines again. And so at that time, I smoked for cigarette money. I would put in 50, 60 hours a week and get paid $10. And of course, living at home, I had no expenses. But it finally came together and turned it into a successful business. He retired at probably age 55 and just turned it over to 3 boys and said, "You run it." It worried him quite a bit, I know, because he'd come back up from Florida and see what we were doing, and you just see that he was scared to death about what we were going to do to the business. So, all in all, it hasn't been bad. It's getting worse today than what it ever was before as far as regulation. Government looking over your back to see what you're doing, telling you how to do it, when to do it. That's the most irritating part now. We were in business for a lot of years, teaching people how to do our accounting, but now we have to have a CPA do the accounting because there are so many regulations, so many rules, so many laws that you just, you could easily make a mistake and get in deep trouble.
You talking about the political aspect of that? What was your view of politics when you were any time while you were younger?
Well, basically, my dad was very conservative, and I think that was ingrained in all of us. He got in trouble with the NRA for some of the things that he did that he'd always done, and didn't see a reason why he shouldn't be able to go eventually the NRA was declared unconstitutional and his problems all disappeared. But they told him that he had to participate in a, I forget what the name of the parade was, Parade of Progress or something like that, where all the businesses, a little like communist Russia, they tell you to come down, you're going to be there. And he was struggling with a business and he didn't want to be there, but they told him you had to be. And in my mind, it was kind of a bad time because of the problems that so many people had. There were so many politicians that would get out there and tell you anything. You do this, and we'll make things great for you. Really, the only thing that made things great for the largest part of the country was World War II. I can remember 1939, before we ever got into the war, the foundry on the south side of Marion that had been closed for years, suddenly it opened. It was making castings. The old Indiana Truck Company, which had been closed for years, it opened and it was built. They were building Garford trucks for the British. Anaconda started really hiring. They didn't have so many people at the beginning, but by the end of the war, they had a lot of people. That's really what brought us out of the Depression. People can talk about all the credit they want for getting us out, but the war got us out of it.
Well, back to your dad's business. What kind of work did he do? What did he produce, and who did he produce it for?
Well, the first business was strictly welding shop. Arc welding was something new, and he had learned it working for Harnisch-Veger Corporation in Milwaukee. And he decided he was going to open his own welding shop. He first went to Indianapolis, but he had been through Marion several times while he was traveling for Harnisch-Veger Corporation. Finally decided that we were living in the Speedway, that he wanted to come up here. And of course he went into business for himself in September. September was a month before the stock market crashed. So it was a very poor time to be starting a business. But he managed to hang on until 1938. And then he lost that. He started this company. The welding shop was just a repair shop. I worked for gravel companies around here and farmers. None of them had very much money to pay. He started this company. He started with a paper conditioner for corrugated box industry. And that was successful. And from there we got into, at that time, semi-automatic stackers, roll stands. And it just kind of grew from there. It's a lot different today than what it was then. Today almost everything is computerized, controlled, and much different than what it was. Your stackers have to be automatic, not semi-automatic, because they want to run a big die cutter or a printing press with two people. They don't want 3 or 4 people in there doing manual work. It's about mostly what I remember about it, except some of the terrifying times when business would fall off, nothing available. And it's 1980 was probably the worst time I can remember. We only laid off 2 times in the history of this company. 1980 was one time. I don't remember when, about 5 or 6 years before that. Try to keep people working. We're doing that now. Business is slow because paper companies are not making money. and they don't want to spend it. We're fighting to keep the people we got working for as long as we can. And yeah, it looks like things are going to turn around. Business can be a lot of fun, and it can be a lot of worry, and sometimes not so much fun.
And something else I thought about. What do you remember about the downtown area from your youth on through?
Well,
Sort of how it's changed, maybe.
it's changed quite a bit. When I was a kid, there were two A&P grocery stores on the square. There were two meat markets down there, one on the square and one about a half a block off of the square. Saturday nights was jammed. Everybody went to downtown on Saturday night to do whatever they had to do. I don't think there was an empty store down there at that time. Some had been closed during the Depression, but they were open by that time. It was a place where everybody had to go. The Groom's drugstore down on the south side of the square. All the kids had to go to Groom's. It would be so packed. Kids sitting around sucking on a Coke. And, they were supposed to be selling drugs, but they had so many kids in there, it was hard to do. Oh, and I remember too, there was a dance hall right on the corner of Adams and 4th Street. I forget what they call it. I was never in there because by the time they closed it, it was before I got old enough to go in it. They closed it. But there were a lot of good things down there, and there wasn't so much in the neighborhoods because there weren't any malls. Then, but downtown seemed to be the place for every kind of business.
Well, was it sort of a when you went there? Was it a family outing or?
Well, early on, yeah, go down with my mother. And then later on, it was just a place for the kids to hang out. Saturday night, you headed for downtown. And, never getting into trouble. I mean, I don't remember anybody having any trouble down there. That's where you had to go. If you just didn't do anything but stand on the corner and watch the traffic go by. And it was all bumper to bumper in all directions. It's a shame you let it get away. Many things contributed. The automobile, for one thing, it got to the point where if you're going downtown in an automobile, you had no place to put it. And then when they started building on the outskirts, the car could get you there. And people just gradually disappeared from downtown. It's something we sorely need today, I think, but I don't think it'll ever happen. Those old buildings down there cost too much to gamble on updating them for a new business. I know they're trying. If I was going to start a business, I'd be out along the bypass someplace, not we put up a new building, probably just as cheap as putting one of those old buildings in shape. On the square again, there was, just off the square, there was a Spencer Hotel over on 4th Street, the Marion Hotel. Marion Hotel burned down. Of course, Spencer, they closed it and turned it into that county complex. There was a little bit of everything down there. Now we got decorative streetlights, and that's about it.
Back to your war experience when you went into the war. What were you drafted for?
Well, at that time you were drafted, and they told you where you were going, whether it's Navy, Marines, or Army. And they sent me to the infantry. basic training was supposed to have been 16 weeks, and they cut ours off at 12 weeks because of the Battle of the Bulge, and sent us home for a week, and then we had to go to Fort Dix and we were shipped overseas. I joined the 106th Division, which was decimated by the Battle of the Bulge, and in a way I was lucky because they had so many recruits they had to go through a whole new training program, and while we were training the war finally ended. I'm like most of the veterans you hear complaining about lack of veteran benefits. I never heard a shot fired in anger, and most of these so-called veterans have not, because most of us were back someplace behind the lines doing what we could do for those who were on the lines. But when 106th came home, I didn't have enough time in overseas to go home, so they transferred me to Engineer Battalion, and we took over Army dumps of all kinds of material, everything from oil line pipes to insulation to tactical timber, which is big timbers, 14, 18 inches in square that you used to build bridges with. And we loaded all that stuff on trains and shipped it to Germany. Well, some of it would. The oil pipe was sold to a company in Switzerland. And that was one of my worst experiences, working with these guys from Switzerland. They didn't believe in shaking hands. They always wanted to kiss you. And when you're dodging men trying to kiss you, you're in, you know. They were working with us for about 3 months. And I never got kissed because I knew what they were trying to do. That's their way. They think that's the right way to do it. And after that, I was shipped into Germany, and we had displaced Polish soldiers that did not want to go home because they didn't want to go back to the communist. And I placed those as guards on dumps. Worked 24 hours on, 24 hours off, posting guards. We had the same problem in the depot where we were collecting all this material. We had German PWs doing the work. And those that would go to the American zone were anxious to get out and go home. And those that were going into the Russian zone didn't want to go. So, excuse me. I had in my office a German secretary, and I found out after a while that he was arranging escapes because he knew what cars were going where and what they're going to be carrying. They'd fill these cars up with little voids in them, and then steal lard and bread. And that's what they ate on the trip. They spread lard on the bread and eat it. After I found out what was going on, I talked to him and found out why. This was mostly guys that were going to get shipped back to the Russian zone when they left. So I figured the heck with it, I let that go on. They weren't about to hurt anybody. Most of the people we had in that camp were what they call a Volksmacht. The secretary I had was drafted at age 16, right towards the end of the war, and we had people as old as one, I remember, was 68, who were drafted to go fight. They couldn't fight. They didn't know how. They ended up getting captured, and figured they'd been through enough in their lifetime. We didn't have any of the real Nazis in that camp. Pretty decent people, most of them.
Well, what do you remember about when you came back from the war? How much things had changed, or what do you remember about coming back from the war?
Well, the one thing I remember is that most of the people that I knew that I'd run around with before the war were gone. At that time, the Army was sending me to college, and my dad was willing to send me to college. He wanted me to go to Purdue. I knew I could, but I'd been told what to do. I waited until I just got plain out of the mood of ever going. If I signed up as soon as I got home, I could have got in the fall semester at Purdue. But then, when it was too late for that, they said, well, check the spring enrollment because a lot of people will be dropping out. Well, at spring, I wasn't ready to sign up yet. I thought I'd wait a little longer. And I waited until I got married, and then I never went. But I don't know that I missed it. I learned a lot on the way of working. I may not be the best business operator in the world, but be better than some that I know went to college. When I got back, it was kind of strange that so many of the people I knew, some of them stayed on in the military, some of them had gone to college. Others of them got back to marry and just picked up and went someplace else. It was probably 6 or 8 months before I located a lot of the people I used to run with. It was some of them, not a lot of them. But the town itself had changed. Saturday nights downtown was not what it used to be. A bunch of kids in cars just running in circles around the square. And I wasn't into that. I was going to drive. I was going to go someplace, not run in circles. That's about all I can remember about that stage. It was kind of strange.
Well, when you went to the war, did most of the people that you knew from school and were the same age as you go with you?
Virtually everybody. I had a friend who was blind in his left eye, and he was left-handed. And when he got down to Indianapolis to the Armory, he told the doctor that. The doctor said, well, that's all right. We can teach you to shoot right-handed. But there was very little, other than being a conscientious objector, that would get you out of it. And I didn't know too many of those. There was only one in my circles of friends who decided he wouldn't go. And he thought he might end up a medic, but they never did call him. They just let it ride.
Well, did you all go to the same place?
No, scattered all over. I went to Fort McClellan, Alabama. 2 or 3 others did, but the others were just scattered all over. Fort McClellan was a real experience. We rode in trucks, and we saw this beautiful stone buildings. Great, this is going to be a good place to stay. But they kept on driving till they passed all these beautiful stone barracks. And then we got out there, we saw little tar paper shacks standing up on legs about 3-4 feet off the ground. That's where we were going. Should have known, I guess. Because we didn't have to stay there too long. That was a good thing. But it was kind of a, feeling of resignation when you graduated from high school. You knew you were going. Wasn't much choice to it.
Well, when you returned from the war, did you immediately begin working again for your dad, or did you?
Yeah, I think I got a week off, and then it was time to go back to work. All three of us brothers went to work just about as fast as we got out. I did know some others that, kind of like every war since then, just couldn't resign themselves to going back to work. Ended up drunk every night. And I don't think the Army had anything to do with that. I don't think the war had anything to do with it. I think that probably was a second nature to them, and they thought somebody else would take care of them. They had a program, I forget what it was, but you could draw cash for 52 weeks after you got out. Wasn't a whole lot of cash, but it was enough for a lot of them. They just didn't care. So something like 52, 20, $20 a week for 52 weeks. And some guys, of course, in 1946, 47 could live on that. Marion itself has changed an awful lot. You talk about downtown or any place. Well, this area right out here where we live, it's all cornfields just a few years ago. And they just keep spreading. You go west of here, they're spreading out into the county. Talk about a lack of building of houses in Marion. Well, there's a lot of them built out in the county. Right on Miller Avenue is the city limits. They just jump across Miller Avenue and build over there. I suppose I feel it's the thing to do, but I thought when we built this house, I wanted something in the city. I had city water, city sewer, city streets. It made sense to me.
How long have you lived here?
We moved here in 1980, fall of 1980. Before that, we lived over in National Home District between Wabash Avenue and Western Avenue, about 5 points. That was we bought a house there in 1952 when we got married. In that place, that's where our kids grew up. It was crawling with kids. Couldn't believe. Well, you know, I talk about a baby boom after the war. Still I'm not there. Now I think it's primarily retired people.
Well, when did you get married?
January 1952. First son was born October of 52. And our daughter was born October of 53. We started a family very early. That's about all I can remember.
How did you meet your wife?
Oh, I knew her. She was 11 or 12 years old. She used to hang around the house with my sister. I waited until she was 18 and I asked her out. She was 20 when we got married. seems to be a big difference today. They either don't get married at all or they get married at 17, 18 years old.
Was there anything else about marrying as a young kid that you remember?
Well, I just remember as a real little kid, we had free reign. I mean, we were all over Marine. Um, you didn't have to worry about getting hurt crossing the street or anything like that. This never happened because what cars they were pretty old and they moved pretty slow. But your library is an example. They didn't even have a parking lot down there. So today you couldn't open up without having a parking lot.
You remember anything about sports in Marion? Because I knew there was some, I don't know how long ago that was, the baseball team.
Well, when I went to school, I don't think there was a baseball team. Football team and basketball team. Neither one very good. The coach was on me because no taller than I am. At that time, I was one of the taller kids in school. And but I couldn't dribble a ball without kicking it. I couldn't do anything, so there was no point in trying. But the big difference between kids today and when I went to school as far as just height is concerned. I don't know what it is. You probably got to eat better than we did. That's about what I remember. Not very much. Should have caught me 10 years ago. I can remember more.
Well, that'll pretty much do it. Thank you very much for your time.